So we should start with today's session. So, dear speakers and PubMed participants, welcome to the Short Talk Session, where authors will present their accepted peer and peer review research presentations. We are very sorry that we can't meet you all live, but we hope that you will be active participants in this conference. Please ask your questions using the Q&A functionality on your Zoom and not through chat. You can write your questions at any time, and session moderator will read them to the panelists at the end of the session. Make sure you write the name of the speaker you are directing your questions. So let us start. We shall start with a very interesting title, Reinventing Scientific Journals, a Paradigm Shift. Our speaker is Matheus Lobo, and he's a professor at Federal University in Tocantins, in Brazil. Also, he is a chief editor of the Open Journal of Mathematics and Physics. Matheus, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Leah, and the organizing committee for this event. So, which is a great opportunity for us to discuss important issues of open science. So, can you hear me well and see my screen? Okay, I hope you can see my screen and hear me well. So the title of my presentation is Reinventing Scientific Journals. This is a new way of communicating scientific results, which we created the Open Journal of Mathematics and Physics, which is we publish open science experiments in the form of white papers, scientific papers. You can reach us at ojmp.org, and this is the website, which is a free WordPress, because this journal is 100% free in every aspect. It's free to build, it's free to publish, free to read, all free. It's a diamond open access journal. I really recommend to watch our interview in the Open Science TV, which is a great thing here. Here are some metrics of the journal you can check. So what we publish, what I am calling micro articles, but I recently just realized that a better name would be white papers. So white papers or micro articles are short versions of scientific articles, and the most important feature, in my opinion, is that it can be updated even after its publication. So because our digital technologies allow this. So I will show you some examples of our white papers to show both the format and the contents. Okay, so the first one is peer reviewer equals co-author, which what this idea is about. Peer reviewers are invited to co-author the paper as long as one single contribution can improve the manuscript. We believe this would foster open science and citizen science as well. The main motivation is that peer reviewing should be rewarded because of the high intellectual effort imprinted during the process. We have only one simple rule. Reviewer adds a single contribution to improve the quality of the manuscript, then she or he is invited by the lead author. Okay, so all citizens, in addition to the peer reviewers, are also invited to give their contribution in order to the evolution of science. We believe this approach is more inclusive and will promote the evolution of science and human being. Okay, so the main idea of our journal, what really is encompassed in this paper, self-publishing journal. So what really is a self-publishing journal? Here we propose a disruption between the publication of scientific articles and the quality control agency. Okay, and what does that mean? First, papers promote empowerment. They are very precious, little diamond precious. So self-publication journal is a scientific journal in which the author and the editor are the same person. Researchers produce papers, and we all know, and the scientific community is furious about paywall journals, since they forbid free open access to the knowledge produced by the scientists and paid by citizens. So in summary, since papers are precious pieces of knowledge produced by researchers, paywall journals lock the scientific knowledge. So it's pretty logical to conclude that the best option left to the research is to reinvent scientific journals. So self-publication journal is very similar to the self-publication of books, which was invented, I would say, as far as I know, by Amazon with Kindle Direct Publishing. Okay, my proposition, which I want to share with everyone, is that each and every researcher should build their own self-publishing scientific journal. This is the overlay journal is a modern, robust alternative for publishing this type of journal. So there is the reference for this paper. I will show it at the end. Overlay journal is a journal that which papers are hosted by preprint server. It's this definition that I'm using, okay, for overlay journal. There's a very important thing here that we take for granted, that publication is independent of peer review. So review can happen after the publication. And how about the quality? So we believe that in the future, the next decades or years or months, hopefully, some quality standards committee agency would rank the self-publishing journals to certify, to assert the quality of the papers, okay? So this idea of self-publishing, it allows more flexibility. The papers can be written in any format, which is more convenient both to the reader and to the author. For example, our white papers are written in numbered lists. This fosters transparency and helps communication. So the disruption we are traditional journals intertwine two operations. They publish and they also assert the quality control. We propose the disruption between the publishing institution and the quality control agency. So the journal is no longer both the publisher and the quality control agency. The authors publish high quality papers in their own self-publishing journal, since it's her and his name that is on the journal. So I assume that no one wants to have their name associated with low quality papers. And then the quality control agency assess the quality of the papers and the quality of the journal as well. Okay, so how to convince researchers to publish, to self-publish their work? There are some guidelines I want to discuss here. First, you can check on this reference how to create your own overlay journal for free. Because the WordPress is free to host the journal. You can use Open Science Framework preprint server, which is free, and there are others in Europe. So you publish high quality papers, then you show the scientific community that what is published is more important, is a way more important than where it is published. So then you convince funders that self-publishing journal is a trustworthy academic publishing. At least here in Brazil, it's our peers who decide which research will be funded. So by convincing our peers, the self-publishing journal produces high quality papers. Okay, I have 1 minute left. So we believe this, so to conclude, we believe that the self-publishing journal provides faster means and more flexibility to researchers to publish their own work. Then the quality agency can verify and rank their journals. So I would like to show here some further reading, a do-it-yourself overlay journal, which shows exactly how to produce one. A few guidelines, open science done, which we believe is open science done right. Some very interesting things about massive open access publication, $1 billion idea on how to go in the transition from open access to diamond open access, sharing the article processing charts with huge amounts of people. So if anyone wants to get rich, this is one idea. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Matheus, for your presentation. We have a few questions, but we will have them after this first part of the short talk session. So we continue with the innovations in publishing. Our next speaker is Marta Błaszczyńska. She is the coordinator of the Digital Humanities Center and the Senior Open Science Officer at the Institute of Literary Studies of the Polish Academy of Sciences in Warsaw. Also, she is the co-chair of the Darajach Research Data Management Working Group. So Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lea, and I hope you can see my screen properly with full slide.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great, fantastic. Thank you for having me here, and hello to everyone. So in this presentation, I just would like to briefly share with you a certain methodology that we have developed for studying innovative case studies in scholarly publication and in scholarly publishing in general, because not only in the publications in the sense of digital editions, but also in terms of digital projects, etc. And as you may see, this this was done with, or is being done actually right now, within the OPERAS project. OPERAS itself is the European research infrastructure that focuses on open scholarly communication in social sciences and humanities, SSH. Some of you probably attended the previous session devoted to OPERAS. And the project OPERAS-P is about developing this infrastructure. We are just over half of it into the project right now. And the case studies that we've been studying have been studied within this innovations work package. It's work package 6 in the project, and we aim to assess innovation in different areas of scholarly communication. So today I will focus on scholarly writing, but it's important to note also that the work package also covers governance, multilingualism, or for example, the way that innovative research is evaluated. This is a shared workflow, and it's a workflow that is shared for the whole work package. You may see that the case studies are being done within the research part, the middle part of this workflow. And more in detail now. So within this innovation work package, we have a certain task. It's the future of scholarly writing in SSH task. You may see the partners involved. And the challenge that we are facing here is to explore the current writing practices in SSH. So we're trying to study what is being done right now and also what are the plans for the future. Methods, as you can see, the case studies that I will discuss are just part of it. So we're also doing an extensive literature review that's been going on for many months till now, and also around 30-40 interviews with researchers who are doing innovative research, or they study innovation, or quite conversely, they have not been doing a lot of innovating publishing yet, to discuss the challenges that they're facing and the way they practice the research writing. So we've decided to select about 30 case studies, and a separate workflow has been developed for this, and quite a detailed protocol, which I will briefly show you, because there are several researchers that are assessing those case studies. So we've decided to develop some joint categories in order to address similar questions. So it wouldn't be too subjective, because it's a highly qualitative study. So we tried to organize it in quite an effective way. The case studies that we've been choosing to assess have been digital editions, but also tools that humanities and social sciences researchers are using for writing, but also for collecting research, for collaboration. Innovative SSH initiatives, and any other scholarly communication projects that seemed to have some novel elements to them. And the way we went about it is we first looked at some key areas that we were interested in that could help the OPERAS infrastructure and its services in the future. And later we developed more detailed categories that were within those key areas or key big fields. So you may see those key areas on the screen. So we looked at traditional but mainly innovative forms and genres, at the novel tools, like I mentioned, for doing research, at collaboration, so how people are collaborating with each other, also in international projects, for example. The workflow in scholarly writing, publishing, and communicating, so how are the decisions made, how is the work proceeding. Related to this also the power and prestige in scholarly communication, so who makes the final decisions, for example. And the evaluation of academic outputs. So how how are those innovative projects, innovative additions being evaluated? Do they fit into the systems of quality evaluation? And based on those fields, we've developed more detailed categories. So each researcher has to, in their assessment of a particular project, has to answer each of those categories. However, those categories have also sub-questions, and those sub-questions are not always relevant for all projects, so we don't need to answer all of the sub-questions. And also, sometimes it's useful to add some extra information. So we collect the basic data. So this might include, of course, the title of the project, for example, but also more details, things which are interesting from the innovation and also open science perspective. So the languages that are being used, is it multilingual project, or the licenses that are being applied? Then the short abstract that is for our own convenience, that describes the project briefly. And then the users and their needs. So we're looking at whether any research has been done about the users, if there's been a gap that the project or the digital edition is trying to fill. What is the role of users? Are they also co-authors? Can they contact the authors of the platform, etc. And then comes the data and technology used in building the tool. So this includes both formats, both of data and of the sources, for example, that are being used, but also from the perspective, for example, from the FAIR standards, how it's being done, also if it's being available in many from many different platforms, the interoperability issues, etc. And then comes the category of affiliation, authorship, and workflow that I have briefly discussed before. So whether we can tell how this platform is being built, how is the collaboration, how is the workflow within it. The other categories on this next slide, you can see, start with availability and accessibility. And this is the question of, simple question of whether you have to set up an account, for example, to see the contents of the website, but also how does the website look or the project look if you're using different web browsers, is it accessible to all, etc. And now come three questions that we've often found most difficult to answer. So the question of sustainability. This is a question of business model that is being applied. So how is it funded? Is it going to disappear in the next 2 years because the funding is gone, for example? But also the question of how is the backup, how is being developed? Will this project change as the technology changes? And the questions related to each other, evaluation and impact. So the question of how it fits within the evaluation process in given countries. So is the evaluation system in the country able to capture this research output? And also impact, which is related to evaluation, but not necessarily. Societal impact, is this educational, etc. And then we have the summary of the innovative aspects, because not all of those categories are innovative in each of the innovative projects that we have chosen. So in this final category, we summarize what we found the most novel or the most new, exciting. You may see here very briefly the protocol that we've developed. So it's quite detailed but useful for us instruction. So we use Zotero to collect the cases, we give them separate IDs, etc., which allows the team, even now working remotely, to proceed quite easily with the work. And this is an example of how the sub-questions look for the categories. So we have two categories, the availability and accessibility, and then the sustainability. and a lot of questions, which are not always relevant for each project, but they allow the researchers to approach these case studies in a similar manner, even when not working together. This is what it looks like. It's a screenshot of our master spreadsheet where we make the notes. So the categories are in green, and then each case study has a separate row. And that's it. I hope that it's been quite useful as an example of how case studies, innovative case studies, in scholarly publishing may be studied. It's quite, we hope it will be useful for others, because it's been quite a result of quite a lot of work and a lot of discussions of which categories should be used in the end. And for sure, we'll be excited to share the results once they're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. We are looking forward to the results of this interesting project. And now, going on to the next speaker, that's Chris Hartgerink. He is the Executive Director of Liberate Science, and its mission is to reset research work. So we are continuing with innovations today. Their philosophy of open is equity and power distribution instead of accumulation. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Leah. So hi, everyone. I'm Chris. And so as Leah already mentioned, we're working on resetting research work. And today I'll talk a bit more about our efforts on resetting research publishing specifically. And I'll be talking about the modular publishing unit. And resetting stuff sometimes really helps, because turning stuff off and on again sometimes fixes a lot of issues. And today I want to share a bit about why and how we should reset research publishing. And if there's anything you take away today from this short talk, then let it be this, so that we've learned from meta research and from practical settings with respect to reproducibility, that we know that after the fact research articles, they distort results, and more continuous, more as-you-go sharing of research modules or research steps can shine a light on the process and also help potentially improve the reproducibility. And to move on to the first part and talk a bit about the why these issues, why after the fact articles distort results. And a big part of this revolves around the 5 core functions of a scholarly communication system, which the after the fact article system fails on. So we see that the after the fact nature and also the old format of research articles has brought along issues such as selective publishing. So the scholarly communication system is supposed to register all results, not just the results that people like. It should be what a result is that we now have unconscious or conscious biases of the predictions. It's hard to publish anything that in the research process that isn't text. So we're very used to sharing and publishing text, but stuff like code or data or video regarding study materials, it's much harder. Plus the accessibility is limited because of pay to play, pay to access, plus these long publishing delays. So researchers are ready to submit something, but then there's this whole additional factor that comes on top of it, which is very uncertain. So peer review times and this big gap between, you're ready to share something and it's actually available can really impede also the research cycles and the innovation. Plus, we only share once at the very end. So we get very limited feedback. It's very hard to change things when you're already done. And finally, one of the things that's also very relevant that we see is that the current after-the-fact articles promotes innovative research, because the model of the journals is selling subscriptions, and for some they might be even called news outlets more than scientific journals, because they publish just innovative work and not replications that solidify findings. And there's a clear innovation dilemma at the moment for these established interests that control the publishing space, because what we've seen in the past decade or so, that a lot of innovations are innovations for articles. So they presume that the article format will keep on existing in the same way. It will keep being the most important vehicle of information, and they're not innovating beyond them. And I think that's a mistake, because a big part, as we see these issues here, is selective publishing happens because we move throughout the research cycle and we never really share much. We don't really communicate. And if we communicate, it's somewhere on a personal blog, or it's on some archive that doesn't get indexed, and it's not part of the official record. So when we already share results and data and study designs as we go along, it's very much harder to adjust things, to unpublish something, because we don't yet have the results. And there is this funny bit, I find, that modular research publishing actually was introduced for one of the first times by Elsevier researchers in 1998. But as we now know, almost 2.5 decades later, they never followed through on it. But I don't know why. I've tried getting an answer on that, but I always get zero answer when I ask. But I think it's a very good idea, because this modular publishing actually says, let's break down the research process, let's communicate it as you go, and say each step in the research is its own building block that we should share and build on. So then the bigger question becomes, how could we do this? Because as we just saw, there's a lot of literature on this. We know after the fact articles have a lot of issues, but how should we structure these modules, or these research steps, or research contributions? So that's what we've been working on at Liberate Science. I did my PhD also on this. So it's been going on for quite a few years. And some of the core principles that I think should go into such a design, because articles, they exist, but these modular research step communication, it all happens before the publishing space. So we have full opportunity to leverage and redesign everything with the lessons that we've learned. So some of the core principles, in my opinion, should be free to play, free to access, that all the content you share and you can see other people sharing can be built on by you or by others. And that also this open content can travel between applications. So you're not stuck in one environment. No, you could just simply open up another application and it just works with the same information. And that we can really focus on what adds value to the researcher's life, and not say we should do, open access mandates because that is good for the policy numbers. No, it should really be what is the core for the researcher. And so I mentioned before that publishing modules, or the modular publishing units, you can regard as a research step. And in essence, to set up this model, it can be really drilled down to a very specific thing. So when we want to share a research step, we create this container, and all we need to do is say, okay, what is the research step that we're taking? So for example, we might share our first one, and we say, okay, we're coming up with a theory. So that's the step we're sharing. And then we can put all kinds of files into this container. But to prevent people from, not knowing where to look and having to navigate all kinds of different folder structures for various research projects by various people, we would have to require people to indicate a main file, the file that they want people to look at first. So we could, for example, add an HTML file, which we've written, that people can open. And then for the next step, we do the same thing. we again create a new step, the only difference being that we also can link it to previous steps. So now we're adding a step that follows from this theory. And we're going to say, okay, it's a predictions contribution that we're making. And now we're going to share just a Word file. That's the core file that we want people to look at. We might add some supporting files. But now we have these predictions that are linked to the theory. And this all happens before any article is even compiled. So if I would be sharing this, people could also already see it and could already build on it. And then we could even say, hey, we came up with some new predictions. We're going to add those, link them back to the theory. And we see these different paths in this research journey coming up. And even somebody else might come along. So the square designates it's another person. And they say, hey, that's an interesting theory. I'm going to add some predictions. And we can keep adding steps of a research process in that way and link it up. And we don't need to actually restate the theory or the predictions when we add another step. So we might add something that isn't text, like materials or data. And we can also share those. It can be a comma-separated file or anything else pretty much. And when we want to do a replication, we can actually just say, hey, you don't need to restate the theory, predictions, and the materials. No, we just say, hey, there's an additional data step that links back to all of the other relevant pieces. And we can keep adding steps in that sense, also by other people. And we can see how this research journey starts developing. And it can even happen that, another third party comes along and says, hey, this work interests me. I want to synthesize some stuff and actually, collect a bit more. So for example, as the triangle, the orange one here at the bottom, it says like, I'm going to try and synthesize these 3 different code sections into one results section and linking up all this work. So by doing this, we could still, if at the end of the process we would want to publish an article, we could still do that. So there's a lot of potential here for as-you-go communication, because actually we can embed the chronology of how we do research and document all the research steps into how we communicate without interfering with the article system. And that gives a lot of potential because there's no zero-sum decision for researchers. So if you're an early career researcher and you want to work open, you could share your research steps as you go along, get the feedback as you go along. At the end, compile it, the text-based bits into a paper, still submit it wherever you would like, but it's all already publicly available for everyone to build on, and it didn't cost you anything also to do that. Plus, because it's open and free to access and reusable, it will also become a TDM resource for people to make services, to check statistics or other things. And as I mentioned before, you could just switch to another application that uses the same information if you would like. So there's no lock-in in that sense. And that really is the synthesizing of a lot of meta research in the past decade, which says, we should pre-register results. We should not selectively publish. We should do registered reports. All these things built into a design that the researcher can just focus on the research steps. And this idea, we've been working on it for quite a while. Hypergraph is our first implementation of this, but this is just one implementation. Really, this core design of these steps is something that could travel between applications. And yeah, I would also like to recognize that this is not just the work that I've been doing, but this is part of a whole team. And if you're interested to learn more, talk more, or see a walkthrough of Hypergraph, feel free to reach out in any way. And I see Leia already activated her video, and I'm like 1 minute over. So thank you for your attention, everyone.
Thank you, Chris, for this interesting presentation. And I believe it's time to ask to read a few questions, so we wouldn't forget everything that we heard so far. So I leave it to Krešimir. He will read the questions from the chat and from questions and answers.
Okay. So we have sort of a good cop, bad cop situation here. I will be asking the questions. And we have some questions for Matheus, 4 of them, and everybody else feel free to write down the questions if you have them now for the first 3 panelists. So the first question is, how would you control media manipulation of science news or fake news if the articles are peer-reviewed after publication? This is a question for
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. I was preparing to answer them, so I was writing down. So how do I control the media manipulation of science for fake news if peer review is done after publication? I would say, suppose one paper brings a minor misconception or minor misinterpretation of a specific result, and then some science news website write about it. So the researcher immediately, I would answer by immediately updating the article if some issue is found. The difference is these articles are updated many times if you need. So in traditional articles, do that with errata, with another paper which is outdated. It's important to mention that in addition for self-publish, this journal is also does also accept external papers, and these external papers is reviewed by the editor, like in the old days. So there is a PhD which is reviewing if that article is suitable or not. So that's what I think.
Okay, thank you. Now the second question for you is a bit more technical in nature. Is there a particular reason for choosing WordPress as a publishing platform? And how do you ensure interoperability with aggregators?
Okay, thank you again for this question. The reason for choosing WordPress is because it's mostly used in the world and it's free. I use the free version. So the reason it's free and very easy to use. So about the second part of this question, if I understand it correctly, about the interoperability, we divided this process by 3 things: the websites, the WordPress, then where the papers are hosted, which is we are using the Open Science Framework preprint server, which is free. It allows DOI, the digital object identifier, and the papers, the preprints are automatically indexed by Google Scholar within 2 or 3 days. So so there are 3 parts: the WordPress, the preprints, and the peer review is done by email, which is also free to use. So I guess, yeah, that's it.
Okay, now I'm not sure we can, Matheus, you have been receiving a lot of questions.
Yes.
So I would ask the audience to start asking questions also to the other panelists, because I'm not sure if we can ask Matheus all of these nice questions. But let's take one more. How do SPJs fit into your official research evaluation system in Brazil? For example, in Poland, journals are awarded points that influence their prestige, and researchers try to get as many points as possible, thus publish in the journals that offer them.
Okay, great, thank you. So in Brazil, it's the same. Journals are ranked by points too. So I have just submitted this journal to our Brazilian agency, and in January 2021, I will receive the value, the number of points of this journal. So it's a normal process. I'm pretty sure we satisfy what they asked to satisfy. So I have a simulation of how much points it will have, but this journal is existing for about 17 months. I will need some more years to increase these points. If you allow me, there was I wrote down about a question about the difference between posting preprints and having the self-publishing journal. This difference is very subtle. Since I'm using the concept of overlay journal, which you send a preprint and then you certify that that preprint is a scientific journal. And how do I certify? With a quality stamp given by the editor, which is me. Okay, I'm both editor and author, but the idea is that my name is on the paper, so I won't write some bizarre or some mistakes, because my name will be associated to that specific paper. So I will ensure the best quality of the paper because my name is associated to it. Thank you.
Okay, and then since we have just one more question for you, maybe you take it, and this would be, how would you get around possible copyright issues if your paper is already in another journal, but you want to make a white paper to make the science more open?
Okay, can you repeat this question, because I need to think again. Let me see if I can read.
Maybe we can ask Chris one question that's here for him, and give Matheus some time to prepare to answer to his question.
Okay.
Okay. So Krešimir, will you read it?
Okay. So, and this is actually, I will join this question between water. So the question for you from the audience is, do you have a problem with peer review in the modular system? How many reviewers would be needed and when to review all the modules independently? And this ties in with my own question. So how do you see review practices at the various lifetime of the modular publication? So how does the review process work in this flow?
So part of the review process is always to guarantee quality, and a big part of sharing the research work as you go along is that actually you open it up for feedback. So in that sense, that commitment to the order of operations is hopefully improves the quality and opens it up for review. But there is the flip side indeed with this question of, just like preprints, there is not a whole bunch of spontaneous reviewing happening. So I think this indeed will be part of the issue. I think that a lot of reviewing already happens within labs. So you do through revisions, because each version of a module is like a unique one. So you could track also the development of how your theory develops, or if your supervisor adds track changes. So that is one thing. But indeed, for additional independent review, that's something we're exploring how to incentivize it, because in essence, I think what Daniel Lakens and Leonid Tjokin, I think it's pronounced, they've been working in what they call red teams, and we've been in contact a bit where you could sort of set a bounty for people to review your work. So that, for example, you say, hey, we'd pay you $20 to look at this for X amount of time, try and find some mistakes. So we've been thinking about ways to incentivize reviews, but I do think that in essence, based on just the goodwill of people, won't be sufficient to get those reviews. So I think that's definitely something to explore more.
Okay, thank you. So Matheus, can you answer the last question for you now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So how do I get around copyright issues if my paper is already in another journal and I would like to write a white paper? This is an excellent question too. I have thought about that earlier, and it's the journals, they retain the copyright of the text, but this is something that is we can discuss. But they retain copyright about the text, but not of the content. Meaning, if you have a mathematical theorem, the journal does not own the mathematical theorem. So we can, anyone can write about that mathematical theorem or some physical results. So I would overcome this issue by adding more discussions about that and writing differently with another notation that satisfies the creativity being added to that. So the content is absolutely not owned by these paywall journals. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now
I have a question for Marta. I think it's unfair she goes away without a question.
Okay.
Because I'm quite interested in new publication types, because we're seeing very much, well, advances in the ecosystem. Not to take too long a time, previously, in the previous session, we talked about research data. So what are your approaches to publication categorization? Do you have some taxonomy you're developing? At what stage are you with the publication classification system?
Thanks, Krešimir. And yeah, it's a good question. So we've tried to be fairly open-minded at this point because it's quite a qualitative research that we're doing, and we're trying to explore the scenery rather than to come in with a certain taxonomy in mind and to try to classify things according to this. Therefore, it works a little bit through recommendation. So, for instance, we've had those interviews with the people that were interested in innovations in the scholarly publishing, for example. And through the recommendations of certain projects, publications, etc., we've gathered some of the case studies that we wanted to look at more closely. So we're not closed off to the data publications, but for now I'm not sure that we've actually assessed any, because I guess a lot of the projects actually do kind of still, even though they're innovative, mirror the traditional publishing. So we would look at a digital edition, for example, which would be less linear, but would still be a little bit like a book. But it's a good point. We will make sure to include some of the data projects or data papers that could be assessed as part of those case studies. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. And back to you, Lara.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mario Malički. He finished the School of Medicine at the University of Zagreb, but his PhD focused on integrity of scientific publications in biomedicine, authorship, peer review, duplicate publications, and so on. Currently, he is working at Meta Research Innovation Center at Stanford. And the topic of his today's speak is recommendations for transparency and research integrity on preprint servers. Mario, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully it should be working now. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning here. I'm in the United States, so they started at 6:30 a.m. I would like to talk to you about a project we did on preprints, and this is a collaboration that I did with 6 other co-authors listed here and a few universities. And we wanted to look at what do preprint servers recommend authors. So sort of how do their instructions to authors look like compared to maybe what we know in sciences. So just a little bit about me. I'm a medical doctor and I've been doing meta research for several years now. I'm also co-editor-in-chief of a research integrity and peer review journal that is published by BMC, Springer Nature, and where we focus mostly on peer review studies and study reporting. And since January this year, I have been working at Stanford on a project that we call the Preprint Observatory. And first part of that project I'm going to present here today. The second part of that project is analyzing the comments that are left on preprint servers. And then the third one is comparing changes between preprints and the published papers. So very related to the study that I'm going to present today is the study we published in 2019 when we looked at 835 journals across all sciences, and we looked at 19 recommendations for transparency and research integrity and how they were addressed. And then sadly, we saw that actually out of the 19 that we look like, and I'll mention them later on, only 4 were on average addressed across all journals. So mostly the journals lacked in very specific recommendations of the things that we consider now to be sort of essential for the rigor of science and transparency. The most commonly addressed ones were conflicts of interests, peer review types, so the journals would specify in 50% of time what kind of peer review they provided, and then any kind of detection of plagiarism, or if they conduct plagiarism detection on the journals. So with this project, which was very similar, what we first did is we wanted to collect all known preprint servers. Now, preprints have become very popular today during COVID, but they have been in use for more than 30 years, since even before the beginning of internet. And despite this, however, no known database of preprint servers exists. So unlike journals where you can maybe go to Web of Science or Scopus or Meta or Google Scholar, you don't really have a list of all known servers. So we compiled this list using several methods. One was a tweet and also a database of Martin Rittman, who has recently updated his list and has around 60 of them. A.bio list, Wikipedia, Stack Exchange threads, and everything that we could dug up on our own. And we excluded those servers that did not allow anyone from the world to post. And by that I mean there's a lot of institutes out there that allow their own researchers, or even funders that allow projects that have been funded by them to be deposited, but not you as a researcher or me coming from Croatia or now from the United States cannot easily or cannot at all post on those. And we excluded ResearchGate, even though sometimes ResearchGate is included in list of preprint servers, because ResearchGate does not have an option for us as readers to list just the preprints or even all the preprints or extract metadata from them, because its primary purpose is not to be a preprint server. And we discussed this with ResearchGate support as well. So in the beginning of this year, from January to the end of March, we collected a list of 57 currently existing preprint servers, and we checked their websites, we checked their frequently asked pages, about pages, policy pages, as well as I submitted a preprint to all of them to see if there's additional information in their submission systems, what they ask of authors. In total, we extracted 31 variables. I'm not going to list them here, but you will see them once I go through the results. And this is just an overview of the servers. In general, 10 of them allow papers from all disciplines, while 34 of them are actually quite specific to scholarly discipline or even a sub-discipline. And there were a few that were meant for researchers from specific regions or countries, where at least one co-author would be from those countries, or if the paper was written in those languages. So what it is that we looked at for the first thing, first we looked at 7 preprint policies. One of them is, do they even have, so the first thing we looked at, do the preprint servers have instructions to authors as a document, what is normally expected in journals, and we saw that only 27 of the 57 have that, so it's less than 50%. We looked at, do they explain, do they check the preprints, meaning do they check for the quality of the content of it before or after it's posted. Majority of them did check for things, and around 15% of them checked after the preprint is published. Most of these were the ones that were using the OSF platform as their build for the preprint server. And then we looked at, do they describe versioning, commenting, do they mention the preprint policies of journals, and that the author should be aware that some of the journals may not accept preprints if they will not accept submitted papers if they've been posted as preprints. And if in today's age with open science, do the preprint servers allow text mining of the full texts of the content that is posted on them? And as you can see here, only 14% or only 8 servers actually addressed text mining issues. Then we looked at what do they ask in a sort of a structure of the paper. And we saw that most do describe what kind of discipline they accept. But when it comes to the study types or how should the preprint be structured, there was much less recommendations regarding that. And finally, the main topic was, how do they and what do they recommend for transparency and research integrity? And there, unfortunately, the results were worse than in the analysis of 2019 when we did it across journals, where the medium actually addressed topic was only 1 across all these 57 servers, with a maximum of 11 being addressed by any single, out of 19, if you remember, out of any single preprint server. So if you look at some of the things here, you will see that almost none of them mention COPE. This is not to be so unexpected because COPE still hasn't published the official recommendation for preprint servers. They have a sort of working document about them, but it isn't as maybe as strict as the recommendations for retractions and things of handling of journals. It will also, I also would be very interested to see would COPE be handling cases of reports against handling of preprints as they do for journals. When it comes to data sharing, 40% of preprint servers address data sharing, most of them recommending it, and only 4 of them actually requiring that authors share their data. And when it comes to even ethics approval of studies, only 9 of the 57 servers address this. Then we also looked at addressing of funding, limitations, null results, plagiarism, which was here also among the highest, with 26% servers addressing will they be screening preprints during submission or afterwards. And then we also looked at statistical guidance, which was surprisingly not mentioned in any of the preprint servers. So none of the servers had any guidelines of how the results should be analyzed or reported in regards to statistics. And finally, we looked at top guidelines, and we also saw that only 2 servers related to the OSF platform as well were the ones who mentioned the top guidelines themselves. So conclude, only half of the servers, preprint servers today, had dedicated instructions to authors pages. And they provided very little guidance on issues that we consider today to be important for safeguarding the science as we see it. There are, of course, limitations to this. All of this data was extracted only by me, and there was all read and coded by me. But of course, these are, I would say, these are not difficult topics to address. We did find a little bit of disciplinary differences, but again, as the servers cannot be very easily classified in disciplines as journals can be, because many of them accept research from all disciplines. And also due to the small sample size, we didn't really explore the detailed differences between disciplines. And finally, as it applies to journals as well, even though you may be lacking instructions to authors or listing specific recommendations in them, it doesn't mean that they will actively prohibit authors to do so. So for example, if an author wants to share their data, the preprint server will not forbid them, but I still think that preprint servers should be very explicit in recommending what we consider today to be standards of scholarly reporting. And that is all for me. I think I'm on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, you're on time, and we have a few questions ready already for you. But let us just go to the next presentation. It's from Nikita Mikhailovich and her colleague. Nikita is a professor, associate professor at the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences in Split. And she's editor-in-chief of the International Scientific Journal, Zbornik Radova. It's from her school in Split. She's a member of a number of boards and associations, and she pre-recorded her presentations just to be on the safe side. So I would ask our video technical support to play this presentation, and then we will have questions.
Good afternoon to everybody. First of all, let me thank the organizers for having accepted our proposal. It's our honor to participate at this internationally important conference in scholarly publishing. Let me introduce us. My co-author is Petra Božanić. She is my assistant, and I'm editor-in-chief of scholarly journal Zbornik Radova Filozofskog fakulteta u Splitu, published by Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences of University of Split. We have chosen this topic since we were interested to perform research which examines how, if they do, by using web pages, scholarly journals present especially editorial and peer review policy to authors. Now, let me project the presentation so that you can follow. We aimed to focus on the analysis of editorial and peer review policy of the Croatian scientific journals in the domain of philology, since we expected to find there more diversity regarding the information available in more than one language. The analysis of 46 active scholarly journals registered on the Hartgerink portal focused on the availability of information regarding the editorial and peer review policy on the web pages of both Hartgerink portal and web pages of the above mentioned Croatian scholarly journals. We started our analysis convinced that open science policies and open access publishing aim to increase the availability of information and transparency of both editorial and peer review policy. However, the practice and the results showed that the situation in Croatia, at least in the domain analyzed, is somehow different from the previously mentioned tendency. Not every information regarding editorial and peer review process is stated clearly on the journal web page. And this is especially true when we speak about editorial policy. In the analysis, we have focused on three aspects: the languages in which the information is available, the phases of editorial procedure, which are clearly indicated and described before, during, and after the peer review process, and the peer information availability itself. Some of the interesting results can be seen on the slide number 3, which shows us the first aspect we were analyzing. It is the existence of the journal web page indicated on Hartgerink portal internet pages. In practice, it resulted that more than 50% of the analyzed journals have some kind of problem regarding stating its web page. This is, in our opinion, a very high percentage, considering the importance of having a web page for scholarly journals. That means that it was much harder to find information about those journals via internet, besides information that is present on Hartgerink portal. Out of 46 scholarly journals analyzed, it results that 22 have their web page, and it is clearly indicated on Hartgerink portal. However, 6 journals have their web page, but they do not indicate that element of Hartgerink web page. Although it is well known, at least to the editors, that it is easy to upload information on Hartgerink. The Hartgerink regulation is available online, and all information uploaded to Hartgerink serve to promote the journal, since Hartgerink portal is very famous in Croatia among the editors and for scholarly publishing. What surprises us even more is that 4 journals indicate incorrect link on Hartgerink web page, which is a very bad publicity for a journal. And we were very surprised to discover that 14 journals indicate non-existent and or disabled web page. Regarding the languages that are present on scholarly journals' web pages, we started from the assumption that they all would have all the information, at least in Croatian and in English. Namely, Hartgerink requires editors to upload all the information in these 2 languages. But in practice, the assumption has not been confirmed. The results have shown that regarding all 46 journals, on Hartgerink, there are 2 pages for each of them, in Croatian and in English. However, when we consider web pages, journal web pages, the results are completely different. 40% of the analyzed journals have the web page only in Croatian, while the information in English is not present. The results question open science policies and open scholarly communication, since the initial hypothesis is that information in English should be available on the web page. Regarding the pages in other foreign languages that are present on journals' web pages, 13 of them give information only in Croatian, as you can see here. Although they are not related only to the local readers, this is very important. While only 16 have pages in both Croatian and English, only 1 journal has 3 pages in 3 different languages, Croatian, English and German, while 1 has pages in Croatian and in English and in German. Closely connected to that part of the analysis was also the information available in different languages. As what regards Hartgerink portal, 43 of 46 journals have all the documents required by Hartgerink, which would be, there's know that, guidelines for authors, guidelines for reviewers, ethics statement, etc. They all have uploaded it on the website in English. 1 journal has these documents only in Croatian, and 2 journals have no documents available at all. The situation is again completely different if we look into web pages of scholarly journals. Namely, here only 16 journals have all the above documents in Croatian and in English. 5 have in Croatian, 2 have in Croatian, 2 have only in English, 1 have only in German, while 8 out of 46 do not have any documents at all. Hence, a spontaneous question is how editors consider web pages, what they think web pages are useful for in the end. The results show that as many as 25% of journals' web pages do not provide any document regarding editorial and peer review policy, which we think that it is kind of a disastrous result. And there is also another overwhelming element. 6 journals have the same copy-paste documents uploaded on different pages in different languages. Now, when we come to the central part of our analysis, it is the phases of the editorial procedure, which should be clearly indicated and described before, during, and after the peer review process. We have boring results. Namely, Hartgerink requires from the editors that they indicate the type of peer review. It is obligatory for all the editors. For almost 50% of the journals analyzed, information indicated on Hartgerink is the only source of information regarding the peer review process. From the results that we indicate on this slide, you can see the differences in peer review process from no peer review to open peer review. What is encouraging is that 15 journals registered on Hartgerink out of 46 use both editorial and double-blind peer review process, and 3 journals editorial and single-blind peer review process. What is much more less encouraging, however, is that only 3 of 46 journals specified in detail the stages of editorial and peer review process. On the slide number 7, you may see the example of the editorial and peer review process. This is one of the examples that maybe the editors could use on their web pages. The whole procedure usually consists of manuscript submission, initial editorial evaluation, peer review process, editorial decision, revision of the manuscript, final evaluation of the revised manuscript, final decision on acceptance of the manuscript, and first prints of accepted manuscript. To indicate clearly all these phases on the web page is useful for all the authors, especially for young researchers, and can probably save a lot of time in answering to numerous emails that editors usually receive from authors regarding all these phases and questions connected to them. On the slide number 8, you might see the example of the editorial policy, which in our analysis only 3 out of 46 analyzed journals indicated clearly and in detail. It contains necessary information for authors regarding 3 phases. The phase before the manuscript submission, during the manuscript submission, and after the manuscript submission. We may conclude that the results show that there are lots of discrepancies among the analyzed Croatian scholarly journals. The fact that many pieces of information regarding, for example, what happens when the paper is accepted for the peer review process are missing from the journal's web pages is very worrying, and it creates confusion to authors. It's also true, however, that many authors do not read the information stated on journals' web pages, but that aspect can be analyzed in some future research in some other occasion. However, it is definitely true that open access publishing has been changing the editorial policy in many aspects, as well as scientific communication and the modalities of scientific publishing, determining the necessary level of availability of information regarding the editorial and peer review policy. But considering that as many as 25% of journals' web pages, among those analyzed, do not provide any document regarding editorial and peer review policy, and only 3 out of 4 journals specify all the phases of the editorial and peer review policy, these facts start to make us worry. If we look at those web pages of those 3 journals, it results that information available on the journal web pages make the whole process more transparent and eventually more easier for both authors and editors. This, of course, concerns the present situation in scholarly publishing in Croatia in the domain of anthropology only regarding the analyzed journals. We believe that the authors should consider giving detailed guidelines available on the journal web page, which would improve objectivity and fairness in scholarly publishing, as well as guarantee respecting of ethical policy, and at the same time eliminating overproduction and reduce potential disputes among authors and editors. Therefore, we conclude that in order to maintain the high quality of scholarly publishing, editors should focus more on editorial, especially editorial, and also peer review policy that will contribute to increasing the probability of publishing only good science and improve quality of scholarly publishing in general. Hartgerink portal and Hartgerink team have definitely contributed in large measure to unify the situation among the scholarly journals, but as you can see from the results of the analysis, there is still much to do. So with this, I would like to conclude this presentation, and thank you for your patience. Bye.
Thank you, Nikita.
Thank you. I'm here for questions.
Okay. Now we will have a few questions before the last three presentations, and since those the last two are a little bit connected, so we will have the questions for them now. Please, all attendees, if you have additional questions, please type them in. Now is the time. And before we get any questions from the attendees, I would like to ask one question to Mario and one to both Mario and Nikita. So let me start with a single question. During the COVID pandemic, pre-publication servers have become much more used than before, especially when we are talking about the ones that publish articles from the field of medicine. Often they are being misused by media, and there are many fake news based on those articles published on these servers, and people are often not even aware that those papers have not been peer-reviewed. I would like to have your comment on this situation, since you come from the field of biomedicine, and also to ask you if you rechecked some of those preprint servers to see if anything has changed, because you started your analysis in January when my question was not relevant.
Thank you, La, for that. So a few things. One, we rechecked only 2 servers during our review process for a journal our paper should soon be out. And that was the bioRxiv and medRxiv, because they had the majority of medical preprints now being published, especially for COVID. And their instructions have not changed, but a few things did change on the website. One of the things was a big disclaimer that was added both on Archive, which is the biggest and the longest running preprint server. And that was, they added a very clear description that preprint servers, that preprints are not peer-reviewed documents and that they should not be discussed in media before they are published in journals. This doesn't, of course, prevent the media from using them or for people from tweeting them. We have seen that the social media interaction on preprints has been enormous, and this has led even to retractions of some preprints. And the other thing that we also observed is that both bioRxiv and medRxiv, which sort of function on the same platform, they started moderating the comments that they receive on the servers themselves. So before that, when you posted a comment, which could be anonymous or you could sign it, there was no sign of moderation, but now there was, because they have also received and seen that people both post offensive comments and sometimes use them for political reasons. So a lot of discussion about COVID preprints ended up being political debate about lockdowns and not lockdowns and how should they be implemented, rather than science that was fueling those studies. So I think I'll stop with that.
Okay, thank you for this answer. And now a question for both Mario and Nikica. So you found that many preprint servers as well as journal web pages don't have clear editorial and peer review policies or science research integrity standards policies. So what do you think? Do authors apply to research integrity standards, comply with those standards, although there are no recommendations?
Personally, I don't think they do. We know from many surveys that one of the biggest misuse in sciences is always regarding authorship, especially giving gift authorship to people who don't deserve them, and with no clear guidelines of how you should justify or not justify authors, or should you post preprints, should you post, protocols or studies, you cannot determine a lot of things. And if you don't really force authors to use reporting guidelines or to report all the elements of the study that can allow someone to assess it properly or replicate it, we've seen from research that authors are unwilling to provide this for themselves. I don't think it's worse. I don't think that authors are intentionally not using these. I think it's sort of the same as journals. When we don't force them to do something, they will take the easy route out, because it's much easier not to mention some of your biases or even some of the details of the things that changed if you don't even ask them to do so. And is this, and how bad that practice is, that is debatable, but I think that definitely servers have space to recommend or strictly demand some things. Because, if they do demand, or if they say we'll check plagiarism, why don't they check, they say we'll check if you had a protocol, or if you registered your trial, or if you got an ethical approval. It depends on what is our priority. And I think that needs to be there, I think we as a scientific community need to demand more from each other if we want to increase our quality.
Okay, well, I cannot answer from the perspective of each journal analyzed, or at least each editor that edits the journals that are analyzed in our research. So I cannot, I do not know the answer for that. I can only speak from my perspective, of course. I think the main question is, as Mario said, yes, it's somehow, what is their priority? That is the question. What is the editor's priority? And maybe they are giving the instructions to authors in other ways. Sharing the information in other ways through email answers or some other ways. I think the open editorial policy, openly published, is much easier and is transparent, and then you cannot, I think it's much more difficult, of course, because you have to know what you publish, definitely. If you state that you use, for example, system for plagiarism, then you have to follow it, of course, or peer review in some way, editorial peer review process or something else. So it is much easier. I have to say, maybe you didn't hear from maybe the audio wasn't so much so good from my presentation, but I have to say this is only the analysis that regards journals that are active on Hartgerink from the field of philology. That's why we're speaking only about 46 journals. So I cannot speak from the perspective of all of them, only one, of course. And that's, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Krešimir, are there any more questions?
Okay, there is one more question for Nikica. It says, we had a similar situation in Serbia, and we have managed to mitigate it by organizing training for journal editors and providing free and open policy templates. Do you plan to organize training for editors?
Maybe this question is not for me. Maybe this question is for Jadranka, which is of course, and not only for the Jadranka, of course, because we have seen that from the graphs, you could see that Hartgerink has much better results than the web pages or journals web pages. So Jadranka is not responsible for each journal, of course, but you know, I'm the editor-in-chief of only one journal, and I'm responsible for that one. So probably after this presentation, you will look, you will go and check what do I have on my web page, on the web page of the journal that I edit. If I can, yeah, that would be a good idea. I would like to share my, if somebody is interested, I could do that, but I'm not in the position to impose anything to the other editors, of course, because I'm not running any portal and I'm responsible only for one web page, and that is, but if other editors think that it is useful, they can of course look into my, they cannot copy paste it, but they can look into my web page of my journal, of the journal that I'm editing, and see what we are thinking of. It's a very detailed process, and there are so many times we have been working. I can be working on it for many months. So maybe they're lacking the motivation. I don't know. The other editors, certainly I cannot answer for them. But yeah, if somebody invites me to do that, I would gladly do the kind of yeah, webinar or something like that. Yeah, why not? Or conference, why not? Gladly. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that in Serbia you have the same problems. This is a very good information for me. Very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And I think that's it for the questions for this part.
Okay, then we go on to the next presentation. Our next speaker is Vanessa Fairhurst from Crossref Ambassador Program, and she will be speaking about applications of scholarly metadata and how accurate data helps your research to be found, cited, linked, assessed, and reused. Vanessa has pre-recorded her presentation, but she's here for questions afterwards. Alan, can you please play the presentation?
Hello, my name is Vanessa Fairhurst, and I'm Community Outreach Manager at Crossref. I'm going to be talking to you today about the importance of submitting good quality metadata and why. I'll detail some examples of the applications of scholarly metadata and how this all helps research to be found, cited, linked to, assessed, and reused. A lot of these examples use Crossref metadata, as obviously this is where my experience lies, but whenever you submit metadata to any organization such as Crossref, DataCite, DOAJ, and others, it should be accurate, complete, and up to date. I'm available for questions both during this recording and shortly afterwards. And if anyone has any questions they don't get around to, then my contact information is here on the screen, and I'll share it again at the end. So we often say at Crossref that it's not just about getting an identifier for your content. Persistent identifiers such as Crossref or DataCite DOIs or ORCIDs enable disambiguation and links to be made between research objects, people, organizations, as well as interoperability across various scholarly services. However, when a publisher, for example, registers a piece of research content, they also send the basic citation metadata. And this includes titles, authors, publication dates, issue numbers, ISSN, anything really that describes the content registered. Crossref also collects non-bibliographic data about the items as well. So this can include reference lists, funding data, ORCIDs, raw IDs, which I'll come back to later, license data, clinical trial information, abstracts, data about relationships, and more. So at Crossref, there are minimal requirements because we need to support a variety of publication practices, but we ask that all of our members send us as much metadata as possible and that it be accurate and clean. The more comprehensive the metadata is, the more likely content will be discovered and disseminated. And we're always looking to add more metadata options. And this is why, because so many people use it. So it's not just about getting an identifier for your work, is about where your metadata goes after you register it and deposit it. And how many other organizations then use that metadata to find the content that you publish. Because Crossref's metadata is standardized and machine readable, it's very useful to many organizations that make content more discoverable, from manuscript tracking systems to library discovery services and tools, or in metrics and analytics. The uses are vast and ever growing. At Crossref, our own developers have used the metadata to build some search and discovery tools that help look up Crossref records for use in compiling reference lists and matching content to DOIs. These free tools allow you to enter any piece of information about a content item, so the title, the author, DOI, publication name, and we'll show you what we have in the database. In the funder search interface, you can enter the name of the funder. In this example, it's the Ministry of Science and Technology in Croatia. And we'll bring back all the publications we can see who have that funder associated with them in the metadata. This is another reason why it's important to provide this information. If you're adding funder details to your Crossref deposits, your content will then be appearing in these search results. Other well-known search engines also use metadata to help them accurately point to content and to link it up. Dimensions from Digital Science uses Crossref metadata, as does the relaunched Microsoft Academic Search, to name just two examples. Another application of scholarly metadata is, of course, to match and link citations. And here's a specific example. So Authoria is a collaborative web-based writing tool designed for scholarly documents such as research articles and conference papers. And they built in a citation tool using Crossref metadata so that authors can search and cite research papers without having to leave the editor. While in the middle of writing a sentence, an author can click the Cite button. This citation tool opens up, speaks to Crossref to ask for the relevant information for that piece of work, and inserts the chosen citation into the text. So this streamlines the workflow for the researcher. The Dryad Digital Repository is a curated resource that makes the data underlying scientific publications discoverable, freely reusable, and citable. Dryad provides a general purpose home for a wide diversity of data types. So their vision is to promote a world where research data is openly available, integrated with scholarly literature, and routinely reused to create knowledge. They use Crossref to match up articles to the data that has been used to create them. So if an author deposits their data in Dryad, this repository will try to connect it with the article, which again increases the discoverability of the publication. Another use is in aggregating and integrating content, as well as verifying records are valid and accurate. An example of this is Unpaywall, who use the publication information, license information, and preprint links in Crossref metadata to help find free versions of content via their browser plugin tool and database. And importantly, all this metadata powers a number of collaborative projects and services. I've detailed a few on the slide here, and I'll go through them briefly. ROAR is a community-led project to develop an open, sustainable, usable, and unique identifier for every research organization in the world. You can now add ROAR identifiers into your Crossref deposits to make the metadata richer and more uniquely identify each research organization. At Crossref, we have an event data service, and here we partner with a range of data sources in order to capture and record events that occur when research is shared, linked to, or commented all over the web. Metadata2020 is a collaboration that advocates for richer, connected, and reusable open metadata for all research outputs. Similarly, Freya, which is a project you may have heard of, is funded by the European Commission under the Horizon 2020 programme, and that aims to extend the infrastructure for persistent identifiers as a core component of open research, improving discovery, navigation, retrieval, and access to research resources. The ORCID auto-update functionality enables their mantra of enter once, reuse often, and this saves researchers time and increases trust in data by enabling the automatic exchange of information between research systems and ORCID records. And a final example is the Initiative for Open Citations. And this is a collaboration between scholarly publishers, researchers, and others to promote the unrestricted availability of scholarly citations in order to build new services and to create a public citation graph exploring the connections between knowledge fields and to follow the evolution of ideas and scholarly disciplines. As part of the European Commission funded Freya project, which I just mentioned, DataCite has made use of Crossref's open metadata to contribute to DataCite Commons. DataCite Commons provides a single search interface for works, people, and organizations. When DataCite Commons launched in September 2020, that includes all 20 million DataCite DOIs and 9 million Crossref DOIs, and the latter number should grow significantly until 2021. The people search integrates with the ORCID API, and the organization search integrates with the RAW API. And this provides a central source for people to find out how research is published, how it's funded, which institutions it comes from, and how it is supported by other research outputs such as data. In this example, I can look at the University College London and drill down into the publications from their researchers. And I can do this by year, work type, and the license that they publish under. There's a wealth of information there that you can drill into if you want to explore. So one thing worth mentioning, however, is that people think Crossref members have a defined set of metadata and that our metadata is complete and fully comprehensive, but that's not exactly the case. This is more of the reality for a lot of our members. And this can be because they're not able to send us many pieces of metadata, and perhaps they don't have the information, they can't afford to send it us through their vendors, or they simply don't recognize the value in sending this information. So I'm going to quickly now show you one of our new tools at Crossref, which is participation reports. And this was designed as a place where Crossref members can track the progress of their metadata in an easy and user-friendly way, identify what's missing and fix the gaps. And this is also because that not everyone is always aware of what metadata they are sending to Crossref and other organizations. So to start, you would go to this page, the link is on this screen, and you can search by typing in the name of a member. And this is what would come up. So this is an example of a member's report. This is Wiley, and they have a very good participation report. And by viewing this, Wiley can easily identify the metadata gaps in their records and what they can do to improve this. For example, by depositing abstracts, adding more funding information to their records. Each item has a more information button that when clicked will display an explanation of each indicator with links to more information, including why that metadata is important and how it can be improved. You can also view the report by content type, selecting from a drop-down list of types available, or view the metadata report for a specific title by typing into the search box. On the right-hand side, you can choose between viewing the statistics for current content items, which are published within the last 2 years, backfile, or by all time. Not all fields will be populated for all titles. Content published in 1960, for example, is not going to have an ORCID record, and some types of publications may not have abstracts or be funded. Back issue content won't have much funding detail the further back you go, so it's worth bearing these things in mind. And this is what our ultimate goal is, to help our members' metadata look like this, collecting all of the relevant metadata and connecting this to the larger scholarly commons landscape. Very quickly at the end here are a few quick fixes for improving the metadata that you submit to organizations such as Crossref. Make your references open, provide license information and include funding information if applicable, use raw identifiers, encourage your authors to submit ORCIDs and to use ORCID auto update, and to always cite data as well. And I've chosen to finish on this quote, which is one of our truths at Crossref, and I think this speaks volumes, as our shared scholarly infrastructure only works well so long as it is interoperable, open, and collaborative. Enabling researchers and publishers to provide the most comprehensive and accurate metadata is vital to this. Thank you. If you have any, if I have time for questions, I'd be happy to take any. Hello.
Thank you, Vanessa, for this interesting.
Outreach Manager at Crossref. I'm going to be talking to you today about the importance of submitting good quality metadata and why. I'll detail some examples of the applications of scholarly metadata and how this all helps research to be found, cited, linked to, assessed, and reused.
Alan, you need to stop the video.
Obviously, this is where my experience lies, but whenever you submit.
Okay, now we are back live. We will have questions for Vanessa a bit later, and now we are going on with the next presentation. It will be presented by Ksenia Schwenda-Radeliak. She is employed at the library at the Faculty of Law, University of Zagreb. And she will be talking about implementation of e-learning in Croatian higher education institutions. This is also pre-recorded presentations, so questions will be afterwards. Alan, can you play this video?
Yeah, just a second. We have some problems
okay.
here. Just a second, please.
My colleague Lucia and I want to talk about implementation of e-learning in Croatian higher education institutions through content analysis of scientific, professional and evaluation papers from 2007 to 2019. The COVID pandemic has changed all lives in every professional and private sector, especially in the areas of knowledge transfer. Direct communication is being replaced by online. Online teaching is becoming the only form of teaching. E-learning is becoming the only form of learning. This situation has, in some places, posed new challenges for all participants in the technical teaching. E-learning can be briefly defined by learning supported by the use of information and communication technologies that includes a full range of activities in which, regardless of technology, learning is the key element. The term e-learning through practice is extended to the many terms like multimedia learning, technology-enhanced learning, computer-based training, computer-assisted aid instruction, and so on. E-learning in Croatia. The term of e-learning in higher education in Croatia has been known since the 1099, but it's being systematically introduced in higher education institutions with the implementation of the Bologna reform. The first systematic implementation of e-learning began in 2007 at the University of Zagreb, with the adoption of the e-learning strategy. After that, e-learning is gradually implemented in other Croatian higher education institutions. Our methodology. For the purposes of this paper, content analysis of the collected articles online available through Hartgerink, portal of Croatian scientific journals, and analysis of evaluation papers of Croatian universities, focused on doctoral dissertation. The chronological criterion for collecting material was years 2007 to 2010. We were analyzed a total of 25 articles and 5 evaluation papers, doctoral dissertation. The source of analysis. For the purpose of content analysis of articles, authors were searchers. The portal of Croatian Scientific Journal, Hartgerink. The search keywords were e-learning, distance learning, hybrid learning, digital learning, higher education, and their versions in Croatian language. A total of 25 articles were analyzed according to language, topics of paper, and author's affiliation. Their relatively small number is possible for several reasons, and two bases once are stated. The search criteria were relatively narrow, and the implementation and development of e-learning in higher education institutions in Croatia is still developing, and there may not be enough relevant data for more papers. Our interpretation. By language, 15 articles were written in Croatian and 5 in English, 5 in both English and Croatian. According to the categorization of articles, 7 of them are professional and others are scientific articles. Within each one research. Within the group of scientific articles, 9 of them are original scientific papers. The general fields are the theoretical background of e-learning and e-learning styles and the application of e-learning in higher education institutions, teacher and e-learning, and student and e-learning. Fields of science: information science, informatics, pedagogical science, psychology, medicine, technical science. The affiliation of the author is diverse. They are employed at high schools, faculties, and Carnet, Croatian Research and Academic Network. Doctoral dissertation. The selection of evaluation papers for this analysis is narrowed down to online doctoral dissertation available in full text. According to upper criteria, there were 5 evaluation papers available for analysis. Evaluation papers were written 4 in Croatian and 1 in English. Our conclusion. According to the analysis of available sources, e-learning in Croatia has in principle been well researched from the very beginning. In particular, teachers are motivated for the future development of e-learning, while the motivation of students is still influenced to some extent by the direction of studies and to some extent the gender of the respondents. Through e-learning, learning styles in general are changing, as well as the ways of social interaction. Therefore, e-learning in common circumstances remains only one of the ways of transmitting and receiving knowledge. But, given the current developments, e-learning has become the currently prevailing way of transmission knowledge and learning as a whole, and thus gain an importance. Our future work plans. It will be necessary to repeat these analyses in a few years and to include other types of evaluation papers which would be more accessible by them. This would make the sample for analysis larger, and comparing their results with existing ones would provide a broader insight into the topic. It would be particularly interesting to follow the inclusion of free, open sources for e-learning and the related promotion of open science.
Thank you, Ksenia. Ksenia is also here to answer the questions later. And now we will watch the final presentation of the day. And it will be done by Eva Vrkic. She works at the Department of Geophysics Library at the Faculty of Science in Zagreb. And she has been an associate to the project Knowledge, Attitudes and Use of Open Science Tools in Biomedicine. And her today's presentation is about the differences in openness and sharing of scientific papers at the University of Rijeka, in Croatia, of course. So we will hear another recording.
Hello, everybody. My name is Iva Vrkic, and I work in Geophysics Library at University of Zagreb, Faculty of Science. And today I will present an analysis with Ivana Hebran-Grgic from University of Zagreb, Jadranko Stojanovski from University of Zadar, and Ksenia Baždarić from University of Rijeka. The name of the analysis is Differences in Openness and Sharing of Scientific Papers, a case study of the University of Rijeka, Croatia. The aim of this case study is to take a look at the practices of publishing, archiving, and sharing of scientific papers at the University of Rijeka in Croatia. We have selected 210 scientific papers by the authors from University of Rijeka in the field of first biomedicine and health, then natural sciences and social sciences and humanities, and for the period of 2017 till 2019 from the Croatian Scientific Bibliography, so-called CROSBI. The Cimego journal rank quartile was used as a metric. The presence of full text in open access in 3 types of repositories and on the social academic network ResearchGate was checked. The existence of differences in the tendency of self-archiving and sharing with regard to the field of science was investigated. The first part of the results is related to distribution of papers. Scientists at the University of Rijeka in the field of natural sciences and biomedicine and health published more in Q1 and Q2 journals. Authors in the field of social sciences and humanities published more in Q3 and Q4 journals, and those journals that are not indexed in the scopes. The second part of the results is related to openness. There is no difference in number of papers in regard to access type. If we consider all fields, the share of open access papers is 51%, and those which are not opened is 49%. But scientists in the field of social sciences and humanities mostly publish in the open access, and these from the natural sciences mostly in closed access. Within the whole set, there are more closed, so-called closed papers published in Q1 and Q2 journals, while the authors of scientific papers published in Q3 and Q4 journals are more inclined to open access. The third part of the results is related to self-archiving and sharing papers. For the self-archiving and sharing of papers, the scientists mostly use the ResearchGate platform, followed then by Archive, then University of Rijeka Institutional Repository, and Croatian National Bibliography. The leading authors with a high degree of tendency for self-archiving and sharing are from the field of natural sciences. No significant relationship was observed between the Cimego journal rank quartile of the journal in which the paper was published and the author's tendency to self-archive or share his work on an open platform. We can conclude that there is no difference in number of papers in regards to access type. Approximately half of the papers were published in open access and half in closed. Scientists from the University of Rijeka, Croatia, mostly use the ResearchGate platform, and the highest degree of tendency for self-archiving and sharing papers is shown by natural scientists. The quality of a journal and sharing tendency is not correlated. Future research may focus on assessment of openness and sharing of scientific papers at other Croatian universities in order to tell whether there may be any underlying national level pattern. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Eva. Now it's time for the final set of questions. Krešimir, are there any questions from the audience?
The audience did not pose any questions as of yet. So if anybody has any questions, I would ask that you pose them now.
Okay. Until that, I have one question for Vanessa. How would you comment the possibility of giving accurate metadata to micro articles from previous sessions?
Can you clarify which articles you mean?
Micro articles that our colleagues Lobo and Hartgerink presented earlier in this short talk session. Would it be applicable?
Yes, it would. It's applicable for any different type of content, really. So it doesn't matter which type of article it is. You can also apply metadata to preprints, to shorter articles, like you're saying. There's not necessarily going to be all the metadata that you can apply to one type of content will not necessarily be applicable to another. So kind of like what I was saying in my talk, not all content is going to have funding information, for example. But as long as you submit whatever metadata you can and make sure that this stays up to date, that you make any corrections when that comes up, which you can do via Crossref. It's very easy and it's free of charge, which not many people realize. Then yes, that's what we would recommend.
Okay. And so you are also probably open for collaboration with preprint servers as well?
Yes, yeah, we are. Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have one question from another panelist. It's a question from Mario Malički for Eva Vrkić. So,
well, I can ask it directly if you want. I was sort of wondering, Eva, because could it be that maybe some mentors or departments are the ones that are influencing will you go open access or not?
Absolutely.
Because I know you looked at quartiles of the journals, but it may be that if a mentor or a boss sort of embraces or forces this on his research team, maybe this is where this could be the reason why some of them are more likely to post them.
Yes, that is another layer. It could be investigated, but to tell you the truth, right now I'm not sure how to investigate that. It seems a little bit difficult to be able to see and to get into this problem because it's personal and it's difficult to get this data, I think.
Thank you.
we have any questions from attendees, or they're fallen asleep already? It has been a long day. If not, I have one question for colleague Švenda. It is now during the COVID pandemic, everyone is using e-learning from elementary school to PhD programs. I expect to be much more articles on this topic published in the next few years. Do you have any plans for doing this kind of research again? Is Ksenia here to answer? You need to unmute yourself. We haven't heard anything that you said.
Sorry.
Yes, now we can hear.
Yes. A future plan of my colleagues Lucy and me is to extend this research through elementary school, learning in secondary school, and in maybe on faculty on Croatia, which have not learning.
Okay, thank you. So if you don't have other questions, let me thank all of you panelists and speakers today. It has been a very long day, and your presentations have been interesting, and I hope our attendees learned something new and had fun as well, as much as we did. So I invite you to join us on the 2nd and 3rd day on the conference, and stay active and do the PubMet run as well.
Now we can go for a distributed coffee break.
Yes, we deserved it. Bye to everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.